first. The prosecution's next witness is now on the stand in the former President Trump's criminal hush money trial. Jeffrey McConney was the former longtime comptroller at the Trump Organization and a man linked to many of the documents at the heart of this case. Earlier this morning, the judge also found Trump in contempt for another gag order violation, fining the former president another $1,000. But the judge added to that he doesn't seem those fines are acting as a deterrent and threatening to put Trump in jail if it happens again. Trump also spoke before going into that courtroom, saying the gag order against him is unconstitutional and calling the trial election interference because it's keeping him off the campaign trail.
Take a look at Greg Jarrett this morning. He went on. Take a look at Andrew McCarthy or Jonathan Turley or Mark Levin. It's like they say there's no case here. And yet the judge has gagged me, and I'm not allowed to talk about, I guess, his total conflict.
Today, prosecutors are expected to focus on the paper trail of records that Donald Trump is charged with falsifying, charges, of course, that he denies. ABC News executive editorial producer John Santucci joins me now, along with ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer for more. John, what's the latest from inside the courtroom?
So we're getting a rare glimpse inside the Trump Organization today, Diane. This is Jeff McConney on the stand, the longtime comptroller for the Trump Organization. Worked there almost 4 decades, just under that. And really, next to Alan Weisselberg, who is obviously the CFO, McConney knew where all the money was, knows all the statements, the records. So though it's a little bit of boring testimony, if you will, it is another person that really gets so much into the organization and the operation of Donald Trump's finances. And really, we know that the records here is center of this case because obviously the 34-count indictment is falsifying business records. So McConney can really shine a light here on how the Trump Organization did business and how some of these financial deals were hidden.
How significant is his testimony, just given his position? He answered directly to the CFO. Yep. He oversaw the whole accounting department. So just hearing his words today, he's there under subpoena. The Trump Organization is paying for his attorneys. This is someone who doesn't want to be there. So how significant is it to hear whatever comes out of his mouth
This
today?
is someone that has cried previously while testifying in another Donald Trump case. Recall, he was on the stand in the New York Attorney General's case because, of course, that case focused so much on the company and the Trump finances as well. And in that testimony, McConney was extremely revealing because, again, the guy knows where all the dollars and cents are. So I would imagine for today's proceedings, and obviously we're just getting into his testimony now, it's moving rather slowly, but as we start to develop, remember, with each of these witnesses, we've been building out a timeline of how payments were orchestrated. So we're heading into the key focus right now. I think very soon we're going to learn a lot from Jeff McConney.
And Brian, he's also talked about who was allowed to sign for what out of what accounts. They talked about a family trust account where below a certain amount, Eric Trump and some others could sign out money. Above a certain amount, you needed 2 signatures. But from Donald Trump's personal account, they call it the DJT account, he says only former President Trump was allowed to sign checks coming out of that account. How significant is that?
It's significant because he's laying down the groundwork for the rules. This is the way that the company orchestrated itself. This is the way that it ran, and explaining for the jury why if you see a signature on this dotted line associated with this bank account, it can only come from one person. I think it's trying to head off, and I don't think the prosecution would go down this road, but just in case, they're trying to head off with someone else could have signed for Donald Trump. You don't want the defense to come up with the argument that says, well, multiple people had access to this account. Maybe Eric Trump signed for his father. Maybe someone else signed for his father. I think going that route with this witness excludes that argument that the defense could make and tries to solidify the prosecution's argument.
And Brian, I also want to ask you about this new contempt charge because the prosecution was alleging 4 more gag order violations. The judge found 1, fined Donald Trump $1,000 for that. But it was the other part of what he said, that he doesn't feel these fines are necessarily acting as the deterrent they should be, and then threatening reluctantly to throw the former president in jail. What would that look like?
If Donald Trump was not Donald Trump, a former president and the leading candidate for the Republican Party, it would look like you hold a person in contempt of court for violating the gag order. You can issue a sentence either on the spot or more likely than not, have a hearing afterwards. If you found that that person violated, you would have the court officers in the room, handcuff your client, bring them into the back room. There's a small detention area there. Judges can either extend it for the remainder of that day. I've seen, hey, it's 10 a.m. in the morning, we're going to hold you till end of business day, and then if you've learned your lessons, come almost like a grown-up timeout. But I've also seen judges say, I'll see you tomorrow morning. And that means you're held downstairs, you're brought downstairs. There's a detention center across the street right next to 100 Center Street. So probably being held there and then brought back woke up 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning and then brought into court on time. It's not the greatest thing in the world.
Well, and we know, John, you report on it, that the Secret Service has been preparing for this possibility. Yep. I'm sure they're all hoping that it does not come to this. But, John, I also want to talk about who's in court with Trump today, because he's got kind of a big entourage today, including his son Eric in court again for the second time. But for the first time, Alan Garden, an attorney for the Trump Organization. What do you make of that?
He's the lead attorney for the Trump Organization. I mean, Alan Garden, we talk about Jeff McConney. What's interesting, and Donald Trump has made this observation between his business life and his political life. Most people in his political life have come and gone over the 9-ish years now that Donald Trump has been really a political candidate, a president, et cetera. But in the decades that he's been a businessman, most people that have worked for Donald Trump have been by his side for a long time. So Alan Garden has been the chief counsel for the Trump Organization for nearly 2 decades. What I make of it is a little bit of the other people that are there as well, right? Because you have Alan Garden, you have Alina Habba, who you and I were talking about off air, represented him in the New York Attorney General's case. One of the things we have heard, Diane, from many sources close to the former president is they were going to be building different people to be around throughout the course of these proceedings to really keep his head in the game, right? Keep him calm. I can tell you from being in court on Friday where no one was there, very few aides, that was one of the toughest days for Donald Trump because, one, as our team has noted, most times he leaves court during the day breaks. They have morning, afternoon sessions. They take little 10-minute recesses. He was in the room on Friday, which was rare, according to Olivia Rubin, who's been there every day, as you know. And to see Donald Trump by himself, not really reacting or interacting with anyone, was just striking to me. And that's where, you obviously get to see someone's body language, see what they're processing, and not able to be distracted, I think, is very hard for Donald Trump. We know this is a person that's extremely social, used to people being around him. So I think, if anything, maybe it's a little lesson from Friday, if you will, given how tough a testimony that was with Hope Hicks. Jeff McConney is a very difficult witness for Donald Trump to listen to. As he said on the stand, Donald Trump taught me lessons, right? Fired me at one point to teach me something.
As a joke.
Yeah,
right?
But the idea that, that's still hard to hear another long-time, in this case, loyal aide, employee, talk about you. So I think to be able to turn around and see a familiar face just to give me, that non-verbal language of, it's good, it's going to be okay, it just helps.
Brian, there's also an interesting aspect to McConney's testimony in that he's sort of recounting right now the day-to-day. But a lot of his day-to-day involved former Trump Org CFO Alan Weisselberg, who himself faced charges, was convicted, is currently doing time for lying on the stand. What does that do for the prosecution, these sort of constant reminders that some of these people Trump was surrounding himself with are themselves criminals now?
Well, from what I'm understanding, it's not just that, but that also McConney was also given immunity from the DA's office to testify. So it's not just that he was surrounded by it, he might have participated in some of these acts as well. And I would expect the defense to really harp on that, hey, this seems to be a group of criminals who are orchestrating this hush money scheme. Perhaps Donald Trump is taken for a ride, so to speak. I think that's going to be interesting. That's what I'm looking for in this testimony. How is the defense, because we already know what the prosecution is going to put forward, how is the defense going to react to, okay, you have immunity, everyone you're talking about all got charged. Are you testifying for your own life and throwing someone else under the proverbial bus, or are you telling the truth? It's going to be interesting to see how he reacts to that. We've already seen him on the stand for 2 other cases.
Can the prosecution make the argument that if this was all above board, why do these people need immunity agreements just to describe what happened?
That argument can be made. It's just going to be up to the 12 people in the jury to say, who do we want to believe? The fact that this person was given immunity so that they can truthfully testify against Donald Trump and give us everything they need without being worried about them being prosecuted themselves, Or is this person testifying in a way to get themselves out of trouble's way and throw someone else under the bus?
And just saying whatever the prosecution wants to.
Exactly. Regardless if you're prosecuting Donald Trump or anyone else, that's always a major fear that I think a juror has, and a rightful one to have when it comes to someone testifying with immunity. It's just going to be interesting to see how those 12 decide which way they want to fall.
All right, John Santucci, Brian Buckmeyer. The conversation continues. Thank you.